Hi everybody, I'm back and I'm going to talk to my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren again about growing up, how it was when I was growing up. Now it wasn't horse and buggy days, but it was a little past that. But when I was born, I had a sister who was a year older than me, and then my brother, I have a brother that's a year younger than me, and a sister who was about 3 years younger than me. And then 18 years later, along came my baby brother. And so he kind of grew up with my children and my sister's children. So, but we had we had fun when we were little because we had no TV or anything. We had to make our own entertainment. And a lot of times we just went out in the yard in the summer, laid on a blanket and looked at clouds and said what we saw, you know, in the clouds. And that's still fun today, if you look. But my great-grandma and grandfather, they were on the farm, and my other grandparents were on a farm. But when my great-grandfather passed away, then we moved to the farm with my grandmother, and I was probably 8 years old. And so it was fun. They had a bigger house than we ever had, and of course we always had big gardens, and we always had a lot of food. Now at that time, you know, you weren't rich or anything. My dad farmed, and he also had another job. He worked for the county and in Ohio. But we always, like I said, we always had food, and they butchered in the fall, late fall, and they would butcher the beef on our farm at the barn. Then we would go down to my mom's parents, my grandparents. They butchered hogs down there. They would go and butcher a couple hogs, and then we would stand around and look around, and then they have this big copper pot on a fire and with oil in it and lard, I guess, from the hogs. And we couldn't wait until we got I want to call them chitlins. They would fry in there, and then we'd eat them, and it was a lot of grease, but hey, they were good. And then we always had a big meal and everything. It was fun on butchering day. And then, of course, my mom raised chickens. Not tons of chickens, but she had a good amount. And we had to help dress the chickens. And probably we started dressing chickens when we were 10, 11, 12 years old. And I always had to stand on the board. My mom would chop the heads off, okay? So we never had a sharp axe, never. It was never, I don't think it was ever sharpened. So Mom would put the head on a board, then put another board on top, and I would have to stand there holding the board with my foot. And then I'd stand around, hold my ears, and then she'd chop, 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 and finally get the head off. And then, of course, you know, the chickens would jump around and stuff. And then we took the boiling water, put the chickens in the boiling water, pulled them out, and pulled the feathers out. And then we had to dress the chickens, you know, cut them open and dress them. And we had chicken all the time. We had chicken, and most of the time on Sundays we had fried chicken. We would probably kill a couple chickens on Saturday and have chicken on Sunday. But we also had a lot of beef and pork. And being on the farm, and the old way is always you had meat, potatoes, vegetable, and a fruit, you know, and usually some type of little dessert, which could have been the fruit. It could have been peaches. And so anyhow, on the farm there, my great-grandparents had a big orchard, and there was all kinds of apples and plums and cherries. And so we didn't like picking cherries because we had to seed them. And that wasn't the most fun, but you know what? The cherry pies were good. So, but yes, I had a good childhood. And we did some ornery things, of course. And I know when I was like in 7th grade, and my brother was like in sixth. We trapped, and so we trapped for muskrats down at the creek, ran through the farm, and so we'd have to get up before dawn. This was in the winter. It seems like a lot of times there was a lot of snow, and we'd go down and walk along the creek. My brother would go down, check the traps, and I was the one who stood up on the bank, and I carried the muskrats. Okay, now if daylight started coming and you had a live muskrat in your trap, they bit their leg off and they were gone. Yeah, they would bite their leg off. They were gone. But sometimes they were still in there, and then my brother would have to take care of them. And he'd bring me up the muskrat, and I was the carrier. But then we took them into town, and I'm not sure, I'm thinking we got like $1.65. It was really pretty good. And because they then sold them for the fur, took the fur off and sold them. But anyhow, it was interesting. But we did that for probably 2 or 3 years, and then I was done with muskratting. But we also, my brother would go frog gigging, it was called, down at the river. The Old Glaze River ran through the farm, and the frog gigging thing, you would go at night and had the frog spear, and I never speared one, but I went, and it was interesting. I didn't go too many times, but we did like frog legs.
What is it called?
Frog legs.
No, what was the activity?
Frog gigging.
What is that?
I don't know. Frog gigging, you just went out and stabbed the frog. They called it frog gigging. And we also would ice skate down on the river, and we would go down. We had an old sleigh. It was a sleigh that my great-grandparents had, and it was they used to carry hay on it out to the cattle and stuff, but we would take it behind the tractor down to the river if there was snow. But there was a big curve in the river down there, and it never froze over to where the water was moving, but on the side it froze. And I don't know how we kept from falling in, I don't know. But we played hockey with a tin can and a stick on the side of the river. And yes, so we had to make our own stuff, our own entertainment. So that was entertainment. Then we'd go back home and have hot chocolate usually. But yes, and we had different animals on the farm, and there were a lot of them. But before we moved to the farm, we rented a place about 3 miles from the farm, from my great-grandparents, and we had a great big barn in the house, and a tornado hit our house and barn. And my mom and my younger sister at that time, you could walk down to the highway. The Greyhound bus was always going back and forth. You just waved, the Greyhound bus would stop, you could ride into town, and then they'd come through and bring you back. And so Mom and Linda had gone to town, and my brother and 2 sisters and we were in school. And the bus driver, Mom said the bus driver was coming down there, and he, oh my gosh, a tornado must have hit that house. And Mom looked, and it was our house and barn. It took the garage and picked it up and set it on the kitchen and living room area, where there was a big picture window in the living room, and where we would always sit when there was a storm, we'd sit in there. And thank goodness my mom wasn't there, because it took a beam from the barn and slammed it right through the window and right into the floor. And we had a big old piano that was a high piano, and Mom always kept a doily clear across the piano, had pictures and stuff across. Us kids' picture was right in the middle. It took the doily, all the pictures except the picture of us kids, and our picture was still sitting in the middle of the piano. Yeah, not harmed. Now the barn, it destroyed, except we had at that time, I don't think we had any hogs in there at that time, but we had a cow in there, and it had a Dutch door in the corner. The Dutch door was open. The only part of the barn that was standing was right where she was, and she was just crying her head off, looking out that door. I'm sure it scared her, you know, of course. All the barn was down except where she was. She wasn't injured. So it was a real weird thing, and of course straw stuck in the trees. And those tornadoes can do funny things. So that was back, I don't know for sure what year it was. I'd have to look up, but yeah, that was a lot. And my mom and dad, when they got married, my dad had been raised a Mennonite. My mom had been raised a Welsh Congregational in Gomer, Ohio. And so they just both decided they would change. So they went to a church up the road from where they lived, and it was called Morris Chapel Methodist Church. So that's how they became Methodist. And my great-grandparents, for some reason, and I don't know, I know they were raised Mennonite, but they went to the Morris Chapel Methodist Church. But now my dad's father, he was Mennonite, and he married Mennonite. My dad's mother, Edna, she was a Mennonite, and then she died when my dad was 18 months old. And then I think about 7 years later, my grandfather, we called him Pop, he remarried, and he remarried a Mennonite. And then I have three aunts.
Pop Herschel?
Pop Herschel. His name was Herschel, and we always called him Pop or Pop Herschel. Okay, my mom's parents, we always called my mom's mom Mommy, and sometimes we call her Mommy Jones. Her last name was Jones. And then my grandfather, my mom's dad, was Poppy. We called him Poppy, and sometimes we call him Poppy Jones. So, but we called my mom Mom. My dad, we called him Daddy. Now, I called him Daddy until after I was married, and we all did. And I can remember my husband saying, "Why do you call your dad Daddy? It sounds kind of babyish." And no, it doesn't. And so I start calling my dad Dad then. But yeah, we always call him Daddy. So that was probably the old-fashioned way. But I was telling my two grandsons here that back when my children were in grade school, and in junior high, because I went to work part-time when my youngest was in 4th grade. So I worked part-time, and I didn't work on Tuesday afternoons. So I started baking sugar cookies. And every Tuesday afternoon, the kids would rush home from school and say, "Where's the sugar cookies?" And I always had them because I knew I'd better. And it was kind of an adjustment for the family, because when I would work, and I always had 2 crock pots. So usually I had 2 crock pots going, one with meat, one with vegetables, or sometimes all of it mixed together. Because then they came home from school and it smelled like I was there. That made them feel good. So I suggest, people who have children and they work, maybe fill a crock pot up. You just throw some stuff together for soup, put it on all day on low, and they come home and it'll just feel comfortable to them. That's what I did, and it did feel, they liked it. And so, yes, I did a lot of crock pot cooking when I was working. And also then before I worked and stuff, we had a lot of casseroles. The kids were in sports, baseball and, softball, summer stuff, and swimming. And I did a lot of casseroles because we could come home from the game or before the game, have some casserole, or if they didn't eat then, when they came home, it was easy to heat up. Didn't have the microwave then, but it was easy to heat up in the oven. So that was a casserole. And my son, he always said, "Okay, Mom, what casserole you making today?" But I love casseroles, so, and they did too. So, but I did this afternoon, I made chocolate chip cookies. kind of. I was talking to my one daughter on the phone today, and I was talking about maybe what I would talk about. And she said, "Oh, Mom, you need to make those sugar cookies." And I said, "Well, yes, I know, but I'm going down to Louisville tomorrow." And I said, "I'm going to take some of these chocolate chip cookies because I know they like chocolate chip cookies." And then my grandson said I'd probably take a couple. So I did bake chocolate chip. And I made soup yesterday. I made some sausage soup, Italian sausage soup. I made it yesterday, and I'm heating it up to have for dinner. And then I'm going to make hamburgers here. The boys, they both like hamburgers. CJ's really big on hamburgers. I got some lean and some 80% here to mix together. But I do want to say today, this morning, we ended up with 3 inches of snow. And this is April, is it the 20th? 21st. 21st. We ended up with 3 inches of snow and ice. Now the roads were okay because they were kind of warm for me, but we broke a 114-year-old record of temperature. Yeah, it's been 114 years ago. It was like 28, and it was 27 this morning or something like that. Yeah. So we made the news. But yes, it was windy, and I didn't go out and cover anything last night because I just thought it was blowing and it was sleeting and wet, and I thought, everything's going to freeze even if I cover it. So we'll see how things do. They might be a little behind, but they'll come out of it. But tonight it's going to be cold again, so we'll see. And maybe a little snow. But that's what's going on today. But my mom and dad, my mom went to a one-room schoolhouse, and my dad went to a one-room schoolhouse, not the same one, but then they went to high school then in town, and they both went to the same high school. But when my mom went to school, they would pick her up. They probably lived 5 miles from the school at least, and they always called it the hack. It was a hack, and it was like, she said, like a little old truck with a long bed and sides on it and bench on each side. And they called it the hack, and that's how she went to school. Of course, no heater. And my dad, I'm not sure how he got to school. I'm not sure. I don't know if we really ever asked him. It's good to ask.
Did he walk 5 miles in the rain?
No, he didn't walk.
Uphill both ways.
He didn't walk. I'll bet my great-grandpa took him. Yeah. I don't know how for sure he got to school, but he would have probably been taken. And but let's see, what else? I was going to say something else about the schools and stuff, but of course we went to school on a bus. We rode the bus. And actually, back when I was in school, if you were from the country, you were kind of, I had a guy in my class, even through high school, he called me farmer. And it made me kind of mad. I felt bad about it, But then when I was about a junior, I thought, hey, I'm just as good as everybody else. So I'm not going to let it bother me anymore. And it didn't. But it did for a long time. But yeah, because most farms didn't have inside toilets, and we didn't until I think I was a senior, maybe junior, senior, and the guys had come out, and my brother played football, and a bunch of the football players had come out and play in our barnyard. And, it was kind of embarrassing for them to go to our outdoor toilet. And so, but they didn't care a bit. They didn't care a bit. It didn't bother them. And then, some of them would come out and we'd study in the house there and stuff. But, yeah, it didn't bother them. It kind of bothered us, but then you kind of get used to it. So it was kind of nice when we did get indoor plumbing, I can tell you. And my dad was kind of old-fashioned. If he said it wouldn't bother him if we didn't have a telephone. Oh, we had a party line, and the old ring, ring, ring. And everybody on our line, we knew who it was when the ring came through. So sometimes we go listen. And of course, my Grandma Jones and Grandpa Jones, they were both Welsh, and they had relation who lived right down the road, and they would talk to the one gal would talk to another gal over at Gomer, and they talked Welsh. They would be speaking English, but when we would get on the phone, they started speaking Welsh. And, that's something too. I only learned a little bit of Welsh, and if we would have really listened and learned, we could have learned that. Now, my great-grandmother, Brenneman, that we lived with until she passed, she spoke Pennsylvania Dutch. And I can remember when I was, probably 4th grade or something, and I don't know, we were talking about our genealogy and stuff, and she said, well, you're Pennsylvania Dutch. So I went to school, and we were talking about where we were from and everything. I said, well, I'm Pennsylvania Dutch. And my teacher says, oh, no, you're not. Yes, my great-grandma told me I was. As it turns out, I'm Welsh and Irish and several other things. So, but yeah. So I've been going through the genealogy, and it's about 3 years now ago that I went to Wales with my sister and my great niece. And my great niece, she led us because her father's from Denmark, and they go over there all the time. And so she knew the train system and everything. And so it was wonderful she was with us, because I think Weezy and I'd probably still be there. It was just kind of overwhelming when you don't know for sure on these trains, but it was nice riding on those trains. We went from Liverpool down to Corris, Wales, on the train, and it was a nice ride. You saw all the countryside in Wales, which is a lot of sheep and rocks and slate, because my great-great-grandfather, he worked in the mines, the slate mines, and we saw where he worked and where my great-grandmother was from. She was just, I think 6 when they came over to Ellis Island, and she remembered. And she's registered there. I'd like to take a quick break here while I'm cooking, and I wanted to show you my chocolate chip cookies that I baked today, and everybody will be eating them. Thank you. Okay, I'm back. I'm frying some burgers just in a skillet for my grandsons, and the soup, the Italian sausage soup that I made yesterday, I'm heating it up, and then we're going to have dinner. Also, I wanted to say that I'm going to do a video on microgreens next, but I wanted to do it today. However, I'm going to be gone next week, and the microgreens have to be sprinkled with water every day. So they wouldn't last, they wouldn't grow. So, and then I've got other videos I'd like to do. I want to show you my gardens and how I do them and clean them up. And right now it's so cold. Now I've been working in them before, but can't do it right now because it's too cold and wet with all the snow we had. So that is what I'm thinking that I'm going to be doing, and then you can see the work that Grandpa and I have put into our house. And then I also am in the process of redecorating in my dining room area, making some new drapes, and so I'll show you those when I get those done. But that's what I'm thinking now, so I think we'll say see you later.